San Francisco Bay Area. I work with 350.org and also with community and labor groups in California.
Awesome. All right, well, I'm going to share my screen and we're going to get started. 1 second. Make David the co-host. All right, there we go.
Wonderful to see so many familiar faces.
Yes, it is. Still got people joining. Sorry, I wasn't going to screen share until I let people in. There we go. All right. All right, so welcome to this afternoon's webinar. Just our little agenda, just some intros and a welcome. You already heard who we are and everybody introducing yourself in the chat if you'd like. Today we're going to talk about street murals and pavement art, virtual banners, safe actions with social distancing. Then we're going to have some fun little discussion time and a bunch of really great resources to share with you. So again, this webinar is hosted by Stop the Money Pipeline by myself and David Solnit. Welcome. And I'm going to pass it over to David to talk about street murals.
Thanks, Amy. And I just wanted to congratulate Amy from Colorado Springs, whose community, after many, many years of struggle, just shut down their city's coal-powered plant, and a lot through creative and arts-based action. So Amy and her colleagues are my hero today. Street murals. How many people have seen all the amazing Black Lives Matter street murals, first popping up in DC, but then all over the country? Pretty amazing. And just so many people just figuring out how to do it and just doing it. And so I just wanted to jump in a little bit into using street murals as a tool for doing public actions, and I'm going to walk through a bunch of different parts of it. But just wanted to say from the why, and in the Bay Area, we've been doing street murals for about 8 years as a part of the climate justice and economic justice and social justice and racial justice movements. And I think we like it because it's an innovation, it's an experiment, it's something unfamiliar. It's a powerful way to visually tell our stories, both through images and words. And it's also, for me as an arts organizer, it's an amazing thing because it involves so many people. And it's also, compared to doing a wall mural, which can be very intimidated to non-artists, it's a very easy way for a lot of people to participate. And we'll also talk about how we've adjusted it to make it pandemic safe. But if you could, you can see some of the Black Lives Matter image in the top center was designed and painted by Berkeley High School students, where I live outside their high school, as part of one of their marches and demonstrations led by Black students at Berkeley High. If you could turn the slide, Amy. So I won't walk in great detail, but there's a link in the slide deck to a lot of the step-by-steps. But the things to think about are choosing when and where you will paint a mural. Often we've done it in front of the bank that we're targeting, or like that. We just did one at BlackRock, which I'll show pictures of in a little bit. And then what's the message? And this is a place to get all the folks you're working with, the organizations you're working with or partnering to decide what their message is. Or sometimes if it's multiple murals, you can invite multiple groups to each have their own message. One of the innovations of the Black Lives Matter movement has been to spell out Black Lives Matter, but then take each one of the letters and have a different artist design the artwork inside each of those. Or we've often, in the climate justice movement in the Bay, we've done circles and have a different group do a different circle and take over a whole city block. So designing the mural, getting the supplies, and I'll go do a deep dive later, but there's sort of there's a lot of different levels of escalation of supplies. And I'll walk through whether you bring fabric or a surface, do it on there, use chalk and let's see, I've got some chalk pastel like I've done a sample of here, or move on to tempera paint, which is washable, or clay paint, which you can make yourself, which this is I'll just get right in there, this is a red clay paint. Both of those can be washed off, but recently people have been in the Black Lives Matter movement using permanent paint so that the murals will stay for potentially a year, depending on how they're cared for, the paint and traffic. So that's a big decision, is where you live, who you are, what you can get away with, what's possible. And we'll dive a little bit into those, thinking about those options. And then the next step, I try and get the core team together and actually physically practice a mini version of the mural, just so you can see how layout works, how the materials work, all that. And then finally to lay out your mural. And I've often done it using chalk and taking sometimes if it's big, take a bamboo stick that this will fit into, break the end and put a rubber band so you have a chalk stick holder. And some ways to make it a little bit easier is if you measure out your shape, whether it's if it's a rectangle, you can actually use a measuring tape. And then I often pull string into a straight line and use that to make the chalk mark along the surface. And then you can, ideally you have a sketch beforehand. You can measure out, I use straight 8-foot sticks, or sometimes for giant letters, I'll screw a few together and have a 12 or 16-foot stick. So you can have a straight edge to draw straight lines on. We've done a lot of circular murals. And so for that, if you just get a piece of string, tie a loop in one end, make a mark on the pavement, have one person hold that with a stick, and then the other person would make a loop here and walk around in a circle, so kind of a human compass. And you can use that a little bit like a grid and do a series of concentric circles to sort of lay out your design. And then one last trick that we've done is sometimes with complicated images like a Thunderbird Woman, which I'll show you later, we've actually cut out giant paper outlines of it, so that rather than, spending 40 minutes trying to get it right, we actually could just plop the thing down, trace it, and start painting immediately. And then the next part is, and this can vary depending on where you are, but often we've had to physically close streets, have banners, people with traffic vests, cones, police liaisons. So if it's in a public street, you need to safely close the street so people can be safe to paint. And then invite your team or members of the public to paint. And we've been trying to limit the number of people who paint in a mural to keep it somewhat safe so people can keep distanced. You've got your mural, cleaning up your supplies, and also as you're painting and afterwards, we often plan for documentation. A photographer, we often will bring a ladder so someone can get up high and do it. If you find a drone photographer, that's often the most powerful. Then making a plan to clean up all your supplies, and we bring water, rags to clean up those pieces. And so that's a quick walking through the step, and maybe I'll walk through a few examples. So I'm looking at materials. These are examples of, depending on where you are, there's some cities where you would be challenged by the city government or the police to actually start painting in the middle of Main Street. So this is a project we did in Napa, California. Our partners wanted to have good relations with the city and the police, so we didn't have the option of doing it guerrilla style. So we actually just primed a giant piece of fabric with paint, and then we taped it down, and we did a mural commemorating the 6-month anniversary of the North Bay fires, and we used natural clay paint from the ground, and the black is all charcoal. You can see it to the right that we scavenged from trees that had been burned in the climate charged wildfires. So that's one option. You can see another example of that in Seattle at the Chase action at the regional Chase Bank headquarters. They wanted to paint the street, but being Seattle, they didn't know that they knew that they couldn't plan on sunshine, or that it might be raining, which doesn't work very well for street murals. So they chose instead to do a 10-foot by 100-foot banner and use that as a street mural. So that's the equivalent of a street mural, but it's prepared. And one advantage is you walk away with it and you can use it another time. Seattle has that banner if you need to borrow it. So those are two, is creating the art on site, creating it off site and bringing it there. Then the next level of escalation would be just using chalk. And this is an example I'm using, using just sidewalk chalk, you know, filling in the area, rubbing it in with a little chalk pastels. You can get brighter colors, and so without using a lot, because it's a bit more expensive, you can actually go around and then use your finger to rub it in. But you can actually do giant designs using combinations of sidewalk chalk, pastel chalk. You can do paint resist. And then the next escalation would be getting your tempera paints, or in this clay paints, and then actually marking out. This one I did actually made a stencil for the word, just cutting it out and then using a small roller on a tray and doing that, and then I freehanded around there. So tempera paint, which washes off or may come off in the rain. And then the final escalation is using permanent house paint, and that will potentially stay for up to a year unless it's really power washed off and hard to get off. Also important to get your spills and mistakes up while it's still wet. On the next slide. Just a couple examples. The Thunderbird Woman was designed by two visiting First Nations artists from Canada, Christy Belcourt and Isaac Murdoch, who did that particular Thunderbird. And we went to the Wells Fargo World headquarters and painted it outside with a little message to divest and close the streets off. Very beautiful. And then to the right is actually the same street. It's we call it Wall Street West. It's the main financial street in San Francisco. And here we invited different groups. Each group took a circle and we said, paint your solution to climate change and injustice. And so each group painted a different mural that told a story. And then local Native American artist did a basket, California style basket design in between, and we painted the entire street with this clay paint, and involved probably about 500 people in painting throughout the day, and did a 2-block strip. There's links to it. And then in the bottom, you can see Seattle, the amazing Black Lives Matter mural, in which each artist did a different letter, and the overall team designed the whole shapes of the letters and layout. Want to go to the next one? We've been supporting essential workers, particularly McDonald's workers, where there's been a COVID outbreak in a whole series of McDonald's in the East Bay area. And so they've actually been on strike for a month now. It's the longest fast food strike in history, and it shut down that McDonald's. So we've been using art to support the workers. There's 33 on strike. And so this was a mural done in the street right in front. And often thinking about the street mural together with what are the visuals that you can provide and that people can hold. So banners, flags, things like that. Also sometimes nice to echo the message vertically as you paint it horizontally. Next slide. And this we did just last week at the request of the Oakland Teachers OEA. Teachers Association. They're supporting a 10-year campaign, the Black Organizing Project, who's been trying to get the Oakland School District's internal police department replaced with non-police alternatives. And they just succeeded a couple days ago. But the OEA asked us to do a street mural. So in the top, you can see our little sketch and our supplies. We chalked it out using that circle and chalked out letters, had folks paint it, and then it was sort of a centerpiece. And this is at the doorway, very public doorway to the school district offices. And so that was one of a whole many levels of creative activity, that one towards them actually abolishing a police department. Next slide. Thank you, Amy. And just a little bit, BlackRock on May 21st held their shareholder meeting, and we were part of the global Stop the Money Pipeline campaign pushing on them. And so what we decided to do in San Francisco was to do a street mural right outside their offices, which has been the site of a lot of mass demonstrations. But since it wasn't feeling like we do mass demonstrations, we tried to figure out how we could do it safely. So if you look at the sketch, we actually divided it into, I think, 6 different areas, and a different painter who was experienced took on each area. We did the layout first, and then each person would go in and paint that area. So it gave them the space. You can see folks painting in the smaller picture down below. It gave folks the space to actually spread out and have some distance. We recruited just enough people to block the streets, do support, document, and do the painting. And so, and we also asked people before they came, let them know everyone needs to stay masked or keep distance. And this was one of the first actions in the Bay Areas before the Black Lives Matter uprising, where people were doing direct action in the streets. And I think that's it. What's our next slide, Amy? And to you. And we'll take questions and have a discussion later. Is that right, Amy? Great.
Yeah, so I see people with questions and their hands up, and we're gonna kind of get through the curriculum pretty succinctly, and then we'll have some space for discussion and questions, because I see a lot of really good questions about legality and things like that. So we'll definitely address all those. But now we're going to talk a little bit about virtual banners, and this is one of my favorite things to do right now, and in the last couple months during COVID. These are 2 examples. The People Not Polluters banner was the first one that I did with David and participated in, not organized. And it's really a beautiful and stunning way to get a message across, but also to build community and to have people express their own artistic abilities and vision and creativity through making a word and a letter together to spell something out. And then the People versus Profit No KXL, we did just a couple months ago to help out some of the organizers on the ground out in the Dakotas. And what's really fun about this is that lots of people will sign up to, all they have to do is get an 11 by 17 piece of paper and sign up for a letter, and then their vision and creativity kind of takes over. You know, you just give a little parameters as to like what your color scheme is so that everything, you know, kind of matches. But it's a way to use it for an online tool as well. Not only is it fun and artistic, something that we can do at home during COVID, but it's a way to, you know, show our power online. These can be shared on social media. You can use these in your campaigns, in your emails. People can tweet them. We sent all the KXL virtual banners to Kristi Noem, who's the governor of North Dakota, and it was really powerful and beautiful to see so many different groups sending banners to her. So here's a couple more virtual banners that have been done, and I especially love the one in the top right that was turned into a light projection. I don't know if everybody saw some of the actions around Chase and BlackRock, but in New York City, the illuminators had people holding their protest signs that they had illuminated onto the side of Jamie Dimon's apartment building in New York City. And it was amazing. And to see them so big on the side of a building is just really cool. And here's a couple more examples of some really cool virtual banners. And I mean, it's easy to make these. Like, once people make their letters, they, you know, take a photo of themselves with it and email it to you, or drop it into either a Google Drive folder or a Dropbox folder. And then it's pretty simple, you know, online to make these. You can get a free Canva account. I use Canva all the time and make a lot of our banners and graphics on Canva. So it's really easy to just upload things to there and spell out the words, and then, you know, download it into whatever file you're using, PNG, JPEG, whatever you're going to be using. And then after this call, we will share all the links and resources with everybody. But here's one that we did in Colorado for Earth Day Live. And the theme of Earth Day Live that week was Strike, Divest, Vote. So we premiered a different letter every day and then put the whole thing together at the end, which was really, really fun, and made our youth organizers feel that they were still participating, even though we were in the middle of a pandemic. They were still expressing themselves and making beautiful art, and you know, then using this to promote events that week. So we'll send you a toolkit resource. It's a copy of a toolkit that David and I use all the time to recruit people for virtual banners. Feel free to make a copy of it and use it as a template to create your own virtual banner. And then there's a how to do a virtual banner toolkit that we will share with you as well. And then I will pass it back to David for safe actions during COVID.
Thank you, Amy. I'll just show off a couple things I have here, which are, we took a virtual banner and we just a regular office printer with color, and we print out 8.5 by 11 versions, and then we were able to tape it onto cardboard. And so we actually brought this to our federal building around dredging for oil in the Bay Area. Or in this case, we actually got a large format printer and made a sign out of it. So it's nice to sometimes have a non-virtual manifestation. But how do we stay safe during our actions? And that's been a big issue of thinking about both how we can do virtual actions for people who can't leave their home or don't feel comfortable being in groups. So in addition to virtual banners, there's also virtual choirs where people have been sharing a soundtrack and then recording themselves singing and having an editor put it together in a video. There's a wonderful Stop the Money Pipeline song that Ale Blakely and folks from the Seattle People's Echo have been putting together. There's a list of other creative actions, like in Brazil, when they were in lockdown, they did a Cacerolazo, where everyone went out at a certain hour and banged their pots and pans against Bolsonaro and his policies. You've seen that sometimes with applauding, things like that. Leafleting, thinking about designing actions that allow for a lot of spaciousness. One of our McDonald's support rallies, we actually had chalk markers and had everybody sort of stay in a place that was about 10 feet apart from each other. And it was both a very powerful, beautiful visual, but it also allowed some people who hadn't been able to come to demonstrations based on their concern to feel safe enough to come out. And I think if you turn to the next slide, and light projections, Amy mentioned it, and there's a resource we'll send out about that, about how you can put together one with an indoor projector and inverter, which you can attach to a car or marine battery. And so for $700 or something like that, that's still a bit, but you can have a functioning outdoor projector that's a lot cheaper than the few $1,000s it would take to buy a full-size outdoor projector. And I think in the earlier slide, I showed some pandemic guidelines. So we'd been asking people before they came to actually follow those guidelines and agree to them, so that we didn't have to have a discussion about what our safety, and also that so people could come to the action knowing what our protocol was and saying, okay, I feel safe with that. Anything to add, Amy, before we find out what other folks or take questions?
No, I'm gonna stop the sharing and then we can do some community building and chatting. So our discussion question for today is definitely, like, if you have a question, we would love to answer your question. But also we're really excited to hear and brainstorm with other groups. Like, what are you doing creatively throughout the pandemic? What kind of art actions or actions have you been doing? And if you'd love to share, we would be really excited to hear you share. So if you want to speak in the chat, go ahead and put an asterisk in there, and that's called stack. And we will call on people as they put themselves in stack.
And maybe while you're doing that, I can respond to a repeated question, which was the legality of street painting. And there's really no cookie cutter. Every city is different, and then it's also impacted by who you are, your organization, what's your relationship to the police, are there 10 of you or are there 1,000 of you? So all those things play out. So people have to really think about and use the wisdom of people who have been in the streets before. But also, you know, it's very notable to me that the Black Lives Matter uprising has really created a huge wave of political space through people power, where you've seen statues come down, and in cities that it was probably unthinkable a month ago, people are painting. As I helped Black-led community action in Richmond, California, we painted a 400-foot mural in front of City Hall in permanent paint. And they didn't get permission, but those organizations that led that, Rich City Rides, and a network of other progressive organizations, they checked in and made sure they had solid support from the groups to back them up if they got in trouble. They had police liaisons if the police had come and tried to interfere. They had people blocking the streets so it was safe for cars, and then just laid it out and painted it. So I know that would be probably unthinkable in New York City or some other places. So that's why thinking about other things like washable tempera paint, that can be a point of negotiation. I've had police come up and check out what the paint is, and it's like, look, this is kids washable paint or clay, which is essentially mud. And so that can be, that's less escalated than permanent paint. And just using a sidewalk chalk is even a lower thing, which people are familiar with, people chalking. So that can be a way. And then the final thing that's, you know, what I told you we were forced to do in Napa is actually to bring your own surface, tape it down or stretch it out, and then paint or chalk on that. So there's also thinking about chalking on sidewalks or places where you don't have to block the street. Also thinking about places where you can get permission. If there's a friendly church or community center with a parking lot, that's a great place to do a street mural. And strong recommendation is as your personal gateway drug to try it on a small scale in a driveway, a friendly parking lot, a sidewalk, test out the different materials, you know, before you go big.
All right, and I know, Verno, you had your hand up, so I'll call on you first. You want to come off mute? Are you still there?
Hello? Yes. Amy, did you reach out to me?
Yeah, I called on you.
Okay, good. Thank you, guys. I'm a civil engineer in Hollywood, Fort Lauderdale area of Florida. And before this crisis, I participated in legitimate, so to speak, street art where we created, I don't know if you guys are familiar with the concept of traffic calming. We had an artist paint an intersection, a mural, abstract piece of art in the intersection. So the idea is as you go through the intersection, it slows you down. You literally become entranced by what you see. So I was thinking if we could create some sort of cryptic art that convey our message and get permission to paint an intersection, then we could do that, and we'd be legitimizing our cause, legitimizing our message, and be functional and still be revolutionary, if you see what I mean. Some sort of Trojan horse, so to speak. But we could legitimize some of the art that we're doing and make it permanent and functional. I just want to see what your thoughts are on that, and what's your capacity for doing something like that.
That sounds amazing, and I really want to see it. David?
Yeah, brilliant.
If you guys were to Google Las Olas Boulevard in Fort Lauderdale, there are portions of some intersections in Fort Lauderdale and some of the coastal areas where I worked with some artists, and they got a permit and everything, and they painted intersections. They brought people in, and we painted.
Nice. And
So,
a lot of the Black Lives Matter murals have been getting city permission
okay.
but a lot of them have also been doing guerrilla, or actually, like in the case of DC, the mayor painted Black Lives Matter, but then people said, yeah, but you're increasing the police budget without any accountability. So activists added Black Lives Matter equals defund the police.
Yes.
There has been interventions there.
And there's some people in the chat who want to look this up. What was the name of that boulevard again?
Las Olas, Lasolas.
Awesome. Perfect. And then I see a question from Willow. Does anyone know the toxicity of tempera paint? Is it environmentally safe? Is it likely to be washed into the ground or into a waterway?
I actually did the research on it because we were painting 5 city blocks of San Francisco during the climate conference, the RISE climate conference in 2018. And anything they sell commercially has to have a laboratory test, and it is not toxic. It's the stuff they use in children's school so that, you know, a kindergartner or a second grader might actually drink a bit of it. So it's actually, it doesn't have any toxicity. And then the other thing that I've done, which is making myself dried clay paint, is basically like soil. If it's powdered, it can be a little bit toxic if you breathe it, but in liquid form, it's completely non-toxic, like clay.
Awesome. And then let's see. Saw some other ones. In London, guerrilla bike lanes are being painted by XR and others. And then there was someone else from XR a little farther up. Oh, XR San Francisco Bay held a funeral for species extinction. Art group made beautiful tombstones, and we filmed this in a local cemetery. Who will stand up? Liz Dodge, that was your comment. Do you want to elaborate on that at all?
They have an amazing
Sure,
arts
I'd be glad.
team.
Yeah, we have a stunning arts team. I don't know. Oh, I see. I taped over my video thing here. Yeah. So we have a wonderful arts team, and they made these gorgeous tombstones from cardboard boxes. And I see Helen is on this call and others who helped with it. Beautiful tombstones. They look just like real ones. And because of the social distancing, we worked with a local cemetery who said it was fine for us to bring our tombstones, each one for an extinct species. And we set them up in the tombstone. We got a great videographer who shot this lovely video. It's about three or 4 minutes. And I think I put a link. I tried to put a link in the chat, and you can watch it. And it was just really powerful, really beautiful. We're going to be putting it on our Facebook page in the next couple of months. You know, we didn't want to detract from all the Black Lives Matter stuff that's going on, but it's a wonderful video, and I think you'll be able to click on it and see it. Helen, do you want to add anything? Helen Stoltzfus?
No, just to say that it was really easy for those of us that participated to just walk into it, stay socially distanced. We wore masks, and just to say that masks are in and of themselves theatrical. So wearing masks in this time speaks to the fact that we can't breathe the air as the climate crisis worsens. So I find they work really great, and thinking about the colors of them and how they fit with the costume is all part of it. But it was very easy to do and maintain social distance. So yeah.
Very cool. Very cool. So our next question is, can we share links that are in the chat? Yes, I have been clicking on them and putting them in my browser, so I will toss them into the email for all of you. And then we have a question from Cheryl, who said, apologize for being a bit late, but she wanted to know if we talked about what makes art actions most impactful. High traffic area, weekday, weekend, media coverage, integrated as part of a larger campaign, call to action, etc. And is this info in our toolkits? Yes, a lot of this info is in our toolkits, but we can expand on that question right now as well.
Which question are we on? I'm reading simultaneous.
It's a question from Cheryl about what makes these art actions the most impactful. Like high traffic or weekday, weekend, media coverage.
I mean, I think that's your job as an activist and organizer, to figure out what impact do you want to have. Do you want to learn the skills and have it build your organization and group? Do you want to impact your local campaign? That's what I often look for. And so I'm always like, who's leading the campaign? What stage is it at? Where can we have the most impact for whatever we're fighting around? You know, but that's everyone's job as activists and organizers, is to figure out, you know, and can we get the press out? Do we have our own documentation? What will happen with the documentation? Also, just jump onto some other questions. It is a great school project, probably for doing a street mural with school kids. You'd want to look for a less guerrilla and more permitted, depending on the situation. Although we've been doing them with, it's a great kid-friendly project. The one we did with the teachers union, it was wonderful because all the folks who had their kids there were able to get their kids painting and the stuff washed out of their clothes when they went home. And also, while you're painting, there's a great moment we often have song leaders. Someone asked about a poet. So actually planning, programming, or singing alongs as you're painting is a wonderful thing.
See, and the next question is there a recipe for the clay paint that you make? Where is the clay acquired and what are the pigments?
So I've been experimenting. People who do earth cob houses do it, but I started by just getting ceramic clay paint, slicing it up, letting it dry in the sun till it was hard, putting in a 5-gallon bucket, crushing it up a little bit, soaking it overnight in water, and then getting a paint mixer bit on a corded drill and mixing it up. So it was, you know, this or a little bit about the consistency of a thin house paint. Then I realized I could get powdered paint. And actually, when we were doing 5 city blocks, I ended up going to a quarry of the Sierra foothills and buying a ton in 2 pickup trucks. So I bought, because the ceramic supplier said, well, you're not making pottery, you don't need all that stuff. And then the other alternative is ask around in your community who has clay soil and use those colors. I mean, I like this because it was a reddish, but ask who has clay soil and what colors. And so you can often get some natural palettes like that. And that's also a wonderful thing to paint with natural earth on top of pavement.
And then also in regards to impact, time and space, is it a point of intervention at a location, and are you doing it? It's not optimal, not always the priority. Glenn, do you want to verbalize that? It's not real clear what your question is.
Yeah, happy to do so. It just hadn't come up, particularly that, of course, in some actions, you're really looking to optimize the location where you do it. There were some examples earlier where you've chosen corporate headquarters, but I think some sites are kind of more permanent. Some are very much sites of intervention that are all about the time in which you do it, and I think that's always worth thinking about strategically. Thank you.
Well said. Thanks, Glenn.
Perfect. And then I see someone's talked about that in 2012, Yes Men collaborated with Greenpeace and members of Occupy Seattle to create a parody website criticizing Shell Oil's drilling activities in the Arctic Circle. Can a street mural pay homage to that? A street mural can pay homage to absolutely anything if designed right. But that was a really cool action because they reserved the, the Skyline Room at the Space Needle, and they invited a whole bunch of like local energy leaders, and they brought in this big team of actors, and it was like, there was an ice sculpture, and it was sitting in like Coke, like Coca-Cola, next to like a scale model of a drilling rig, and they did this whole just presentation, and it was, it was absurd and like totally illogical, but it was actually really logical and made a lot of sense in the context of what they were doing to the Arctic. So things like that, not only like this kind of art that we're talking about today, but street theater is another one of my very favorite things that I actually learned a lot from David, with the big puppets and including poetry and all sorts of fun things that we've done in some of our campaigns, that I've used them locally in my campaigns.
I'm wondering, Amy, if we can shift and hear from what folks are doing, recognizing that a lot of people who are listening are a lot of brilliant organizers and experimenters and artists.
Yeah, so let's pause on questions, and definitely we would love to hear from some of the folks on this call about what you're doing and what you've been doing creatively.
And that's our job as activists and organizers, is to constantly think outside the box and try and innovate and think about how can we do stuff that's impactful. And also, particularly during a pandemic, I find it's calming and community building to actually get to make things with our hands together. And so finding ways we can do that. How do we want to hear from people, Amy?
I'm gonna start calling on people if people don't volunteer to talk about their art or what they've been doing during the pandemic. Deborah. Are you able to come off mute, Deborah?
Yep, here I am. So I was sharing a video, a very short video. It's up there. Let me share it again. It's something that is great for organizing, building teams. We didn't do this. We did a virtual art party, and for Fossil Free California, and it was directed at our pension fund campaign to get teachers' pension money out of fossil fuels. And it was held in April when we weren't sure what we could do, and it was a Zoom art party. I just wanted to say that really helped the team keep going because we weren't able to move and be with each other up in Sacramento. So it's a short video. If people want to see it, I have it. I'll put it again here. There.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing that. Yeah, Fossil Free California, you all do some amazing art action. You guys, everybody should click on that link and save that to watch after this call because it's really cool. And then Hope.
Sorry, no, I'm just a dancer, and you asked the question, so I answered it. And I just started, a character kind of came out of me during this pandemic, and I started creating like sort of solo dance movements, speaking, just even in my backyard, talking about the impervious surfaces and how it floods my backyard, and just, kind of doing that kind of thing.
That's amazing. I love that.
Love to see you think about how you could work in other people and maybe simplify the movements that you could do it with a group.
Yeah, that's exactly why I'm on the call. I've been sort of thinking about that. I mean, the other thing I've been doing is online story circles to build community. So it's inspiring to hear the bigger things. I'm from a really rural area, very small town, farmland, but it's the Eastern Shore of Maryland. And so we're sinking and there's a lot of high waters. And so, yeah, that's why I'm here.
No, we're talking a lot about visual, but the other main areas of art are the things we hear: music, song, instrumentation, and then movement. What can we do with our bodies? So those, you know, I often focus on the visual, but I reach out to the dancers and the musicians and singers to help on the others. So I often think if we're gonna, that at the end of the day, all we have to change the world is the things we make with our hands, the visuals, our bodies, how we move, and our voices, songs and instruments. So we need all three.
Yeah, it is inspiring to think about the virtual, like getting people involved that way visually, though. It's really exciting. And I think would work here on the Eastern Shore.
Very cool. Does anyone else want to share about something you've been working on?
Quick thing that we've, I'm part of the Portland Red Rebel Brigade, and we had done a couple of the no going back Sundays actions where we would gather with signage and not wear our Red Rebel costumes, but physically distance ourselves along a bridge. It's been the same bridge each time because it's a little bit easier, and also the traffic is slower on it, so that there's a lot more visibility and there's more pedestrians also on this bridge. So that was very powerful. We stopped doing it when the Black Lives Matter protests started, so that, you know, we could give them all the energy and support they need. But I actually have a quick question that I'd love to hear anybody's input on. I've recently been concerned about the white face paint that we wear as part of our Red Rebel costume, if you're familiar with what it looks like. The Red Rebel has kind of an ascribed costume that we're supposed to be all looking the same, because the importance isn't our individuality, but the kind of that we speak for the group. Does anybody have any opinion about that?
Maybe I could the Red Rebels, they dress starting in the UK and spreading around the world, head to toe in theatrical red clothing, and often do white face paint. And so there's been some discussion because missing and murdered Indigenous women also use the color red. So that's been a discussion point that's been raised. And Mary, you're asking about doing all white face makeup. One thing I often tell people to do when they're doing street theater is ask somebody who's not part of your group or movement and doesn't know you, is like, what do you get from this? And just to have an ordinary person, if your community or the public is your audience, and say, you know, do you understand what our story is? Because just using art doesn't necessarily get us. I'm always thinking, what are the universal images and ideas that can break across culture, class, race, age? So I think it's also good to challenge yourself and actually go up and ask somebody who's unfamiliar. It's like, when you see this, what do you get from it? Bunch of folks on Stack.
Yep, I see. Helen, you're on Stack first.
Yeah, I just wanted to respond to the white face issue and just say briefly that I think it's also important that we educate folks. And I've heard the white face critique come from young people, and I don't think that a lot of them realize the tradition that it comes from, a long tradition of clowns and Renaissance and mostly British tradition, but wearing white face as a clown, the clown is a archetypal challenge to authority. So there's so much in the history of wearing white face that is very powerful. And I think part of our job as activists is to bring along some of the young people who don't have that history and don't know it, and educate them.
Awesome.
Thank you.
And I hope I'm pronouncing this right. Kareth from XRNYC.
Yeah, I can speak from experience about the face paint and the Red Rebels. I was part of the Red Rebels in New York City with XR, and we did some pretty big actions at Wall Street and Lincoln Center, some other places. And for a number of reasons, I stepped out of the Red Rebels just because of a couple of things. But in that transition, they changed the color of the paint, the face paint. And people that were really, really driven, you know, and inspired and felt the power of the Red Rebels when they were in white face paint, a number of them gave me feedback that they really thought that it had lost the visual power when they shifted that face paint color. And I would definitely, the woman who just spoke, I apologize, I forgot your name. Exactly what she said, I agree with 100%. And I'm speaking very personally, I felt like it was somewhat disrespectful to the gentleman who created that visual, you know, whose original theatrical concept that was. It's not to say that we can't change and kind of morph things, but it really was a global, very clear, united kind of concept that did come out of the roots of mime and theatrical. And so I thought it was really kind of, you know, a wrong step to react to maybe some of the voices in the crowd to change it from a white face paint to a green. Secondarily, I also have been to Pine Ridge Reservation and worked with the Lakota women who are particularly on a film called Women of the White Buffalo, which is about murdered and missing Indigenous women. And they, you know, a number of them were pretty aware that I was in the Red Rebels, and yes, it is really important, the Red Dress campaign that they have running. But I can't say that I personally ever received any feedback from that. There was any kind of, you know, any kind of upset with it, because again, this is about blood of all species, and I would absolutely second that. It's about the awareness. And so when you are out as the Red Rebels, you've got to have people that are doing outreach and who are handing out flyers, flanking, explain what that concept and what the power of this is. It is, we are all one. So that's all I have to say. Check.
Awesome. Thank you. All right. Well, we only have 4 minutes left, and I have to jump. I have to go do tech support at a Just Transition online rally. So I know I see Toby and Wolf, both of you have your hands up. And if it's not about Red Rebels and it's about what your group is doing or art, we have time for like 1 or 2 more shares before we have to wrap it up today. But we're going to wrap up the Red Rebel conversation.
Yeah, I'm happy to share something. This is Toby.
Awesome.
Yeah, Code Pink is locally, well, Code Pink nationally is calling for 4th of July to be a day to get out there and do actions around the message of independence from war. And so locally, our chapters, some of our chapters have decided to do a mass bannering around the Bay. Well, mass, we want to organize small groups to make large banners with messages like demilitarize, defund the police, defund the Pentagon, and just bring the subject of the war, which is so hidden from the public, and remind them on 4th of July that we want to be free from war and also free from militarized police as well. So we welcome groups to just organize your own little bannering somewhere over a bridge, over a highway or major street or wherever. And the more that people see multiple messages as they drive their cars around on 4th of July, the better the action will be.
Awesome. I love a good banner drop. It's always my favorite. And it's totally safe right now. That's a pretty small action. Like 1 or 2 people can go out and do a gorgeous banner drop. And yeah, that's
exactly. And you can make just get an old cotton sheets work the best because they take the paint better. Just get an old cotton sheet and make gigantic letters on it, and it can be really visible. And then you can reuse it over and over again.
Yep. Awesome. Oh, thanks for sharing. I love banners. All right. Well, we have about 2 minutes left. So I'm going to wrap up our call for today unless anyone else has like a burning desire to share. There is the beautiful slide deck that we were sharing just a few minutes ago. And throughout it, there are links. And then at the very end, there's an entire page of resources for art actions. So we'll say it's like a street murals toolkit, a virtual banner toolkit. We have the Stop the Money Pipeline art kit, art resources from 350.org, a songbook, and some safe actions during COVID, like a menu. And then our friends at Beautiful Trouble have their Irreverent Guide to COVID, which is one of my favorite resources also. So everybody expect the recording and all the resources from us. And a big thanks for taking time out of your Saturday afternoon. And a big thanks to David for doing this webinar with us today. And I'll pass it off to him to say goodbye.
Thanks so much for doing the logistics of putting the webinar together. And again, congratulations for shutting down your local coal plant, Amy. And huge appreciation to everyone for the people I know on this call are brilliant organizers and arts folks. So much appreciation for all the innovation we're doing. And that's how we make breakthroughs and take care of each other in this time, is by using our voices, our body, and the things we make with our hands to take care of each other and create that better world and the just recovery we need. Thanks, everybody.
Have a good Saturday.
People want to get off mute and give a shout out.
Get off mute. Say goodbye.
Thank you so much.
Thank
you.
Great.
Thank you. Well, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Enjoy your day.